called today's meeting was because the Muslim community, quite rightly, but actually even those outside of the Muslim community, and some of them, our friends are here, are very worried about the negativity and hostility that we hear about the niqab and also the hijab. And we see that it used to be the case 5 years ago, maybe even more than that, that actually the only people who talked about banning the niqab or banning the hijab were those on the far right, were the racists, were the British National Party, were the National Front. But now, unfortunately, the pattern and the trend that we've seen has been that we're starting to hear not only from mainstream politicians, but also from UK government ministers. We had Jeremy Brown calling for a discussion on the restriction of the niqab in public places. So now it's reached the highest level of the UK government. And what happens next? If they decide to ban the wearing of the veil, a religious right, a religious freedom, the principle of any democracy, the right to religious expression, the right to freedom of expression, then what will the next step be? What will be banned after that, and after that, and after that? And some of the speakers will touch upon these points. The other thing I think all of the speakers will touch upon is what is the real reason why people talk of the ban of the niqab or the hijab. Is it really just about a piece of cloth? Or is there something deeper behind that? Is there a deeper Islamophobia behind that? Is there a deeper mistrust of Muslim community? And if so, what is behind that and what can we do to try to address that? My thanks to the UK Islamic Mission for being very good hosts. Whenever we ask them to host a meeting for us, they never say no, and they always put on great refreshments for us. So my thanks to them. My thanks to a really illustrious panel of speakers who, again, as I said, I'll introduce as or when we speak. You'll hear from each of them. Each of them will speak for approximately 10 minutes. And Amr knows I'm a very strict chair when it comes to the length of time that you can speak for. So they'll speak for around about 10 minutes, and then we're going to open it to the floor. I'll chair the meeting, and inshallah we'll hear from you as much as we possibly can. Any questions you have, any concerns that you have, any comments that you want to make. And then there's a few ideas that we have in terms of how to take this forward. Because we don't want to have a meeting just for the sake of a meeting. We want to tell you some resolutions on how we can take this forward. So without any ado, I'm going to ask Sheikh Sohaib Said to come forward. He's a community activist for a long time. He is a scholar, Islamic scholar. He's learnt much of his teachings from the Al-Azhar Islamic University. But more than that, I think he's known by this community as a real activist, particularly in the field of interfaith work. So to give from a scholarly perspective, I ask Sheikh Sohaib Said to come forward and share his perspective.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. I begin in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, and praise Him as He deserves to be praised, and ask Him to send His blessings and peace upon His noble messenger Muhammad and all His prophets and messengers. And I greet all of you with the greeting of peace, the greeting of Islam. Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. Thank you, Hamza, for the very warm introduction. I'm also somebody who regularly is giving the sermon in this mosque, usually downstairs in the minbar or the pulpit downstairs. So it's nice to be upstairs and to see also in front of me both men and women to hear on this important topic. And I'm glad also that in our panel we have a mixture of men and women, because all voices are important to be heard in an issue like this. Neither should it be only men who are speaking, let alone dictating an issue like people's dress. Neither should it be that any gender is excluded, because we are, as Muslims, men and women, we complete one another and we support one another. And we support one another when there are such issues as these attempts to ban women from dressing according to their beliefs. I specifically decided to wear this dress or this costume, which is the dress which we are given at Al-Azhar University, as a way of teasing my sister Yvonne, who I saw some years ago in Edinburgh. We invited her for some events there. But between that time and now, number one, I went and studied at Al-Azhar. Number two, she had a very interesting encounter with the previous Sheikh Al-Azhar, Muhammad Sayyid Tantawi, when he extended his hand, I'm not going to do that to her, he extended his hand to shake, and she declined to shake his hand, and so he called her an extremist. The reason why I bring this up is because the same Sheikh Al-Azhar, may Allah have mercy on him, despite the fact that many people disagreed with him and criticized him for various positions that he took. When in France they were deciding to ban the hijab, even to ban the headscarf in schools and public places, unfortunately he is the one who said to Sarkozy at that time, who was the interior minister, that it's not for us as Muslim scholars to interfere in the affairs of any country. Now, while this is true, what we need from Islamic scholars is to stand up for people's right and to stand up for Islamic teachings, not to be defeatist, as we are even hearing people saying in this current debate, as to, well, if the British want to ban it, then let them ban it, what's it to us? As if we are somehow separate from the society and don't have a voice and don't have the right and the duty to speak up as to what we believe. Also, during the time when I was studying in Egypt, when I went there first, it was Tantawi who was still the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, and he also tried to instate a ban on the niqab in the Azhari schools, which also created a lot of controversy, because certain things that he said to back up that point of view were in contradiction to things that he had written in his own commentary on the Quran. Because in his commentary on the Quran, as a scholar of tafsir, that is his field, actually, not fiqh, not jurisprudence, but in his commentary on the Quran, he mentioned what is known as the famous opinion of the Muslim scholars, which is that the awrah, or the part of a woman which is allowed to be uncovered in a public place, is the face and the hands. إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا. And the most famous position of the scholars is that this means the face and the hands are allowed to be shown. And therefore covering the face, while not an obligation, is also not something which is totally alien and unknown in Islam. Because this is another extreme to try to negate it, to negate its role and to negate its presence in our Islamic culture. Because it is the position of some of the scholars, and I must say, and I do insist as well, that this is the position of a minority of the scholars who had said that covering the face is an obligation for Muslims. But in all issues, whether it be issues of halal and haram and many different things on which Muslims have different opinions, we in a country like this, we come from different backgrounds, we come sometimes from different countries, we come from different schools of thought, and we are always going to differ, we're going to disagree, and we can never impose one opinion upon all of the Muslims. That's speaking from a Muslim perspective. So if any of my sisters believes that covering the face is obligatory, it is not something that we can force her to take another point of view or another position. That being the case, one can still engage in discussion, in reasoning, in presenting the arguments. And what I say is that if we were left to our own devices as a Muslim community and not constantly being put on the back foot, then I believe that what's already a small number of sisters who choose to wear the niqab in this country, over time would become less and less. Somebody quoted the figure to me, and I don't know if it's correct, maybe someone has statistics, maybe 300 women in Scotland wear the niqab. So, be that the case, be it another number, over time it might change. But it's when people attempt to ban these symbols, and what's important is to understand, what do they consider a symbol of? They consider it, and this is my opinion, they consider it a symbol of Islam and of Muslims and the things that they dislike about Muslims. Just like in Switzerland where they ban minarets. Is the problem with some bricks that go high up into the sky? Or is the minaret only a proxy for the Muslims of that country? And so this kind of talk of banning the niqab is not about a piece of garment. And when these things happen, we Muslims have a tendency, and a good tendency, to be loyal to one another, and so we should. And it's on these occasions that we should stand up and defend the right of our sisters and of all women and all people in this country to dress according to whatever their convictions dictate. And so we will not be taught our religion by politicians. Like a few years ago, the MP in Edinburgh, when I was volunteering there, I was a student in Edinburgh, MP Nigel Griffiths, who was a deputy of Jack Straw, at the time when Jack Straw made his outrageous intervention on the issue of the niqab. And Nigel Griffiths came on Newsnight and he said that Muslim women who wear the veil are selfish. And he used the word selfish. So we got in contact immediately with his office and we said, did you speak to any Muslim women before you decided to call them selfish? Did you speak to anyone who wears the niqab, especially, since that's your point of contention? So we invited him to come to the mosque, it was a central mosque in Edinburgh, and to come and sit with some Muslim women and to discuss his point of view. So to his credit, he did that and he came and he engaged in a discussion with the few of us who were there, including some of the local women of the community. And we were listening to his point of view, we were discussing with him, until he came to say, but you know what, it's not an obligation. And I said, stop right there. You don't come into our mosque and try to teach us our religion. We know very well what's an obligation or not an obligation, or where there are differences of opinion. But it's not your business to decide whether it's an obligation or not. That's irrelevant to the right of a person to dress as they please. And even when in Islam something is an obligation, then a person still has the right to choose when and how they adopt and how they follow that obligation. Our role as Muslims, as leaders in the community, or as imams or scholars, is simply to explain to people and to present to people and to make the matter known. And then it is up to people to adopt and to follow. And with that, I'll conclude my comments and pass over to the rest of the panel. Wassalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much to Sheikh Sohaib Said. One of the great things in this day and age that we live in is the use of social media. Everybody I know is on Facebook, is on Twitter. Even my uncle Akhtar Said, even he is a prolific Facebooker nowadays. So even if he can be on Facebook, nobody has any excuse whatsoever. And on Twitter, I saw a great exchange today by our next speaker, Sister Yvonne Ridley, who many of you know, she's a journalist, an activist, a great community activist, a great voice, not just for the Muslim community actually, a great voice for I think sensible policies across the board and across the spectrum. But she basically was arguing, and this Sohaib touched upon this point, with a man who was trying to tell her what she should or shouldn't be wearing, and she kept saying, get out of my wardrobe. And I think it's something we might hear more and more, and I think it's absolutely right. That actually this issue about the niqab and the veil is not necessarily the issue. What we're here to do, and you saw the title of today's meeting, is to defend a woman's right to choose. Because whether she chooses to wear, be it a dress, a skirt, the face veil, hijab, anything, surely the principle should be that not men, or not us, not politicians, or the state that dictates what somebody should or shouldn't wear. Ultimately, this is a matter which, of course, in the democracy, we hail as important, this idea that you should have the freedom to wear what you like. And that's what's at the root of it. But without any further ado, I ask Sister Yvonne Ridley, as I say, I was going to say was a journalist, still very much is a journalist, still writes in many a broadsheet, including the Scotland on Sunday. She is an activist. She has, many of you know, a very interesting story, certainly in the last decade, but has been a real voice on the left, I would say, but also a real voice for strong democratic values. So I ask Sister Yvonne Ridley, who's made a long journey to be here. Thank you very much for coming here to take the mic.
Brothers, sisters, friends, salam alaikum. I have made a long journey, but from within the country. I actually moved to Scotland nearly 2 years ago, and it was one of the better decisions that I think that I've made. It is true, I did have a Twitter exchange with a man who was trying to tell me what I should and shouldn't say. So when I address you now, it's not as your sister in Islam, it's actually one of the other hats that I wear, and that is as a feminist. And I think it's important that every individual, especially every woman, has a right to wear what she chooses to wear. It's her decision, and it's certainly no one else's, which is why I told that man on Twitter today, "Get out of my wardrobe," and it is becoming a catchphrase that men have no place in a woman's wardrobe. But it's a catchphrase I'm sure that you'll hear time and time again. The first time as a Muslim I was called upon to defend the niqab was in a radio station in London, and I was being interviewed by James Whale, who's known for his robust style of interviewing. And he was saying, this niqab, it's outrageous, it has no place in Britain. And I said, what is it that you don't like about it, James? And, you know, he has millions of listeners, and he was saying, well, you know, I can't see, if I can't see someone's face, then I just don't know how sincere they are. I don't know if they're telling the truth. It makes me feel uncomfortable. I said, whoa, hold on a minute. We're talking on radio. Millions of your viewers can't see your face. They don't know what you look like. They don't know what I look like. And yet you're communicating with them and you have a very popular show. How does that work? And of course we are in an age of communication. The man on Twitter who I told, get out of my wardrobe, I have no idea what he was wearing. He had no idea what I was wearing, but we were able to communicate. When I moved up to Scotland, one of the first things I had to do was appoint a Scottish lawyer to do the house buying. Because of the distance, and I was in London at the time, I didn't meet him until the point of signing a contract. And yet we had been able to negotiate and work out terms by email, by telephone, by fax. There are all sorts of methods of communicating with a person. We do it every day. So this business of, well, we can't see somebody's face. Jack Straw was mentioned, and he started the whole furore off when a woman voter seeking her democratic right went to his constituency office to raise an issue. And she walked in and she was wearing a niqab, and he asked her to remove it. And that is what sparked off the whole incident. Now, I'll come back to his motives in a minute. But he was interviewed on the Today programme, again, radio, and he said, well, you know, I felt uneasy because I couldn't see this woman's face. I couldn't see her facial expressions. For all I know, she might not have been telling me the truth. And I'm thinking, this is a man who sat in the cabinet opposite Tony Blair as he lied and lied and lied about weapons of mass destruction. So it doesn't matter whether he can see somebody's face or not. I wouldn't trust his judgment as far as I could throw him. But it was interesting also that Jack Straw was the foreign minister of Britain for some time. And he travelled to countries across the Middle East. And I'm quite sure that he never raised any issues or complaints or questioned the use of the niqab in Saudi as he was helping cut arms deals. I bet he didn't do it in Kuwait or Qatar or any of the other Emirati countries where women do wear the niqab. And inshallah, when Scotland does get its independence, I do hope that the Scottish Foreign Minister will be far more enlightened than Jack Straw and his views on what women should and shouldn't wear. But if I go back to his reason for raising the issue of the niqab, it was after the Iraq War. Labour knew it was going to get punished in the general election, and something very interesting had happened earlier with an MP called Phil Willis. He's since been disgraced and kicked out of Parliament. But he was told, you're going to lose your seat in Oldham. We've looked at it statistically, all the think tanks, the experts, the number crunchers, and, you know, bar a miracle, you will lose your seat in Oldham because of the Iraq war, because you've got a large Muslim presence in Oldham, and they'll turn on you in the general election. The next thing he did was whack a Union Jack on his election literature, and he targeted the Muslim community, and he used the politics of the far right, the politics that got Hitler elected to power, by targeting a minority group and creating hate and suspicion and fear, and against all the odds, he actually kept his seat. As soon as that happened, all the gurus, the political gurus in Blair's government were looking at the Oldham factor. How did he do it? He did it because he divided a community, and he went for the politics of race and hate. And that was what Jack Straw was doing with the niqab. And now, new government, but it's the same old politics. You know, you get Labour, you get Tory, you get Tory, you get Labour. Same old, same old. And this is what is happening now. The niqab is becoming an issue. Why? You've got 300 women who maybe wear it in Scotland. I think there may be about 2,000 to 3,000 in Britain. The majority of niqab wearers that I know are white Western converts who obviously aren't wearing it as a cultural garment, and they're not wearing it because they're told to wear it. It's their choice. And why should we punish a woman who chooses to wear something that she feels will make her closer to God? Why should we punish a woman because of her piety? So, you know, this is, it's great that we can talk in this arena, and it's good to see so many brothers here because, as the Sheikh said, you know, we do need to support each other in our various struggles. And trust me, if anybody comes after your beards, the sisters will be there to stop that from happening. But another reason why banning the niqab is short-sighted, and I'm amazed that the money-grubbing, corrupt Tory government haven't spotted this, is that some of the biggest spenders in the world are from the Middle East. And if I can give some statistics here, a couple of years ago, the money taken over the shop counters in London's West End, £120 million came from Middle East shoppers, mainly Arab women. And this is something that I pointed out at a conference in Genoa last year. And I said, thank you, France, thank you, Italy, for banning the niqab, because all the big spenders are now coming straight to London. You have turned London into the fashion centre of the world instead of Milan and Paris. This is where the women from the Middle East are coming to spend their money. And you know, if Cameron is that short-sighted that he is going to try and ban the niqab using English legislation, then hopefully the tills in Edinburgh will be ringing the changes and again benefiting from such a short-sighted, racist piece of legislation dreamt up by one of Cameron's people. But as I say, you know, we should make this a political issue. We should hold politicians to account. And unfortunately, the politics of race and hate are interchangeable between the Tories and the Labour politicians. So this is something that you should all think about as voters. That's about as much as I have to say, except Sheikh Sahib also briefly mentioned my meeting with Sheikh Tantawi. One of the reasons that he called me an extremist was not only because I refused to shake his hand, but I asked him why he didn't condemn Nicolas Sarkozy for ripping the hijab off the heads of schoolgirls. And of course we can see what's happening in France now. And every time a man from a think tank or a male politician in the world stands up and attacks Muslim women for wearing the niqab, you can guarantee within hours a sister somewhere will be verbally abused or physically abused because some idiot will have listened to the words of these politicians, and then they see a sister wearing a niqab and they think that it's open season. So please, even if you don't like the niqab or you feel uncomfortable, it's not for us to decide, it's for the individual who chooses to wear that. And as I said before, why should we punish a woman who is wearing something because she feels it brings her closer to God? So thank you very much for listening. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much. An unusual style, very relaxed, but getting right to the nub of the issue. In terms of the politics as well, I wrote to the Minister of Equality in the Scottish Government, Shona Robinson, and I asked her just to confirm that in Scotland and in the future in Scotland, would we ever consider banning the niqab? And the answer was a categorical and unequivocal no. We would never consider, because it goes against human rights legislation, which we'll hear about later on, I'm sure, but also because it goes against that principle that a woman should be free to choose what to wear, not be dictated to. So I'm pleased to say, and I'm happy to distribute that letter if anybody would like to see it, on behalf of the Scottish Government.